Hello, and welcome to Audible's live broadcast with Esther Perel. We're so happy to have you join us today and have a little discussion. We're going to share a couple of sneak peeks around this new series that Esther has been working on with the Audible original team. And we're just really excited for you to be here. In case you don't know Esther, she has 17 million people who have already engaged with her content from TED Talks. You may have seen her from The Secret to Desire in a Long-Term Relationship and Rethinking Infidelity. She's also the author of a best-selling book called Mating in Captivity. If you haven't listened to it, personally, I found it really fabulous, especially to hear it in your voice.
I love the way you say if you haven't listened to it. You don't say if you haven't read it.
No, if you have, it's on Audible. And also, she's been working a great deal on an upcoming book that's coming out in October called The State of Affairs, and I'm very much looking forward to that. But in addition to all of this, working on this project with us, and I'm really excited to chat with you. So thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Okay. So what we're doing today, like I said, we're going to talk a little bit about the series. We'll have some audio snippets to play from the series so that you can kind of get a little bit of a taste. And of course, what will be best is getting questions from the audience here and our Facebook fans. So please go ahead, comment with your questions, and then we'll answer those in the second half of the hour. So to start, Esther, I would love for you to share a little bit about the series. Where should we begin? You've written books. Why an audio series? Why audio?
So I write books about relationships. I lead public conversations about relationships. I teach other therapists about how to work with relationships and coaches. And but there is a place where very few people ever go. And that's what happens to couples behind closed doors. And I wanted to see if there was a way for us to invite people in that very private, intimate space. Not in order to be a voyeur and to just see what happens for others, but because when you enter there in the antechamber of another couple, you actually enter also in your own. And you are you have a meeting with yourself through the others, which we call in my jargon a transitional object or a transitional. It's like the blankie or the teddy bear, Through that teddy bear, you have an experience of you, but you're projecting it onto the teddy bear. Right? You talk to the teddy bear, you say to your doll, it's okay, we're fine now, nothing's going to happen. And you are exchanging with your own vulnerability, but through the experience or through the story of another. And I was approached by Audible. It wasn't my idea, actually. My idea was I have to find some way. I'm looking for a creative project, but I didn't want to do just therapy on the air. I didn't want to be on TV. I thought there is something about not seeing that actually makes it easier to see yourself if you don't see the others. You just hear them. Because then you're not busy with the picture of the other people, and it kind of reflects more easily back onto you. And so when Audible approached me, the original idea was something more similar to the work that I had done as a consultant on the Showtime series, The Affair. He said, she said, back and forth. And I thought, it's interesting, but that's not exactly what happens in a couple. In a couple, it's I say something, and you react to what I say. And I react to your reaction. And then you end up saying the opposite of what I actually want you to say. But it isn't just because of who you are. It's also because of what I just did that triggered you and set you up, which made you then say something to me that made me do the opposite of what you actually would want, and even that I would want, just because. And that loop that is so familiar to all couples. The more I do this, the more you do that. And, and the way we are interdependent, and the way that we make relationships, but relationships make us. And that's what we began to explore with Audible. We just went into the room, the consultation room. We began to meet with couples. We sent out one email. We got 450 applicants.
Oh, my goodness.
And we just met with a few people and began to explore and to work very much the way I do. 3-hour sessions. Where should we begin? Is a series of unscripted, anonymous one-time couples counseling sessions
Where did you find these people? You said you sent out an email or?
on Facebook.
Oh, wow.
And on my email list, on a
guys.
portion of my list. I just sent an email. I said, I am doing this series. I'm looking for couples who would like to be in a session with me from diverse background with diverse issues. And it will be the same as the sessions that I would typically do in my office. But you will be recorded. And we will change your names, but we will not change your voices. You know, reality TV is not real.
Oh,
This
absolutely. Yeah.
is real.
Yeah.
And this becomes storytelling because of the truth. The other piece I wanted to do was to tell stories that are true. And stories about couples that are true, which is often the opposite of what you're seeing on social these days. You see jolly faces a lot, and you see people's happiness because people won't share their sadnesses so easily. And so I thought everybody's hungry for truth
Yeah.
in one way or another. And can we open up that space for truth, for authenticity, for boldness, for courage, for openness, for intimacy, all of that.
When you were selecting the couples, was there something about the truth and realness of their story that attracted you guys? And then you said, right, these are the 10 couples that we're going to treat, or?
When people come to me, they have to apply online and they write they write to me their story. They actually say why they want to come, what they're grappling with, and what they are prepared to do to change their situation, not just what they expect from me. And from there, I often have a sense, the most important thing if you're going to do a consultation style work is what can I offer these people in 3 hours? Is this something that we can tackle? If this is too complex, and then I don't think it's fair. I mean, that's in general. Then I'm saying, no, they need more than what I can do, that what we can do here in these few hours. But many times I think, we can make a dent here. This is a place where what is the goal? The goal is, can I have these people together? We can create a momentary experience that is different. Something else from what we typically do with each other. And if you can have people come in one way and come out another, you've done a lot. You've given them a glimpse of what it's like to not be stuck. Because most of the time people come to us because they are stuck. If they could change it themselves, they would do it themselves.
So we've talked a lot about it. Maybe we should listen to a short clip.
Yep.
So this is from the episode that's actually coming out. Ooh, is it today? I think it's coming out today. So you can listen to it at audible.com/Esther if you'd like.
Not tomorrow. It's every Friday.
Oh, see?
It's every Friday.
It's a good thing she's here. So let's go ahead and cue that clip, and we'll just go ahead and listen.
Any picture that I found that was of he and I during that time was torn to shreds. Anything, my wedding dress. I had our wedding vows on tape, cut that to shreds because that wasn't real.
Right.
You don't stand up in front of all these people, make these vows to me, and then a month later, break them. It wasn't real.
So in that clip, we only hear the wife, and she's talking about how emotional the betrayal was from her husband, but we don't actually hear the husband in this. Can you talk a little bit about this relationship and kind of what insights came from it?
Yes. It's a very powerful story because they are together 40 years. He's been cheating on her for probably since the day they were married, on and off. And yet they had a very happy marriage, and both agreed to that. They had a deep relationship, a family bond, a sexual intimacy. Happy people cheat, and betrayal runs deep. And how do you heal from that? And so part of what she's grappling with is when you experience betrayal, you can't trust the past anymore. It's one thing not to know the future. We never know the future, but we generally think we at least know our past. We remember it somehow. When you have a story like that, you think the whole thing was off, a fraud, a lie. What ground am I walking on? And so she's grappling with those fragmented pieces of her reality, and at the same time, she wants to stay with him, because when she's in the here and now with him, she actually realizes that this is the man she's known, this is the man she loves, and actually, more importantly, this is the man who has loved her, but he wasn't happy with himself. And she begins to understand that distinction. It's not easy, it's back and forth, but she knows it wasn't something he did because of her or to her. It was something that he did because of, as she calls it, his own demons. And so part of the session and the relationship at this moment is how can he live with himself knowing the amount of pain that he inflicted on her? And can he change and shift from the feeling of shame that he has about himself to the feeling of guilt that he can have for her?
And so I love that episode. I just gave it a listen this past week. It's so intense and just so emotional. And I've actually been chatting about the series and this particular episode, the last couple of days. And it seems like, a lot of people want to listen kind of as a voyeur, but it doesn't feel like when you listen that that's what happens. I think you mentioned that a little bit at the top. Can you talk a little bit about how to listen to that kind of intensity and how to take it in and what you hope that people will take away?
I mean, it's doing extremely well, the podcast. And it's number 3, I think, in the US at this point, number 1 in Canada. And so I've gone to look a little bit at the comments. I'm curious, how is this received? And I was fascinated. I couldn't put it down, but it's stressful. This is my relationship. You're telling my story. Now I know this is my first step. I have to go and have this conversation. I mean, you think at first you're entering into the intimacy of another couple. And then you very quickly realize that you're actually standing in front of your own mirror. And you also realize, even if the specifics are not yours, we understand the difference. But there's a lot of things that have happened in our relationship for which we feel our partner hasn't really been accountable for. And I am not ready to let go of this until I feel that you really get it, that you get how it affected me. That. And once you transpose it to the issue rather than to the specific, then you enter into the universality of the themes, and that's what people are resonating with. You are listening to this, and you are hearing the voice and the crackle of the voice and the breath and the tears and the joy and it really reunited me with the power of the voice, which babies hear for months before they see. It is our first sense, that the voice of the mother, the sound is really primitive and archetypal, and I'm actually so glad to be exploring this through the medium of podcast and voice.
Yeah, it can be quite powerful.
More than it's story and voice. And voice is breath and sound. It's all of those things. And I think people are really resonating with it.
Yeah, for sure.
It's never been done.
And we don't hear it in that clip, but one thing that I really like about this episode is you give really practical tips on this gentleman who is having a lot of trouble moving from self-focus. I've discovered who I am and I'm having this trouble and I've created this really negative experience for this woman that I love. I want to get out, but also like her need to feel acknowledged. And I really like in the episode how you sort of keep having to refocus him.
Yeah, actually, Ira Glass kind of took that specific piece on This American Life because, I stay with him. I help him have the conversation with his wife. It's not just talking about. I help him do it in the moment, in the here and now. I help him be accountable. It's so hard. It's so hard. And then he does it. And then he goes, but. And then I say, no, but. And then he goes, and I. And then I say, no, not you. Can you just really walk over to the other side of the bridge and camp there for a moment, just in her experience? Because self-esteem is this ability to hold himself in high regard, even though he is a flawed individual. And that ability to be imperfect and to own that is a line from Terry Real that I really like, a colleague of mine, this, and is what I'm guiding him to. And so he does it, he slips, he does it again, he slips, and it's theater. It's really, it's not like, people just yakking away. It's people experimenting and experiencing right then and there.
And being able to see or hear, people being so human in front of you with like just absolutely no holds barred. It's really these raw conversations. I think personally it just, normalizes things that I've felt, whether or not they're the same. But
It humanizes too. It
for sure.
normalizes and humanizes, really.
Yeah.
It's very hard to judge the people because you really see them in their complexity with their vulnerability, and it humbles us all.
Absolutely.
That I think is a very nice side effect.
Absolutely. Let's listen to another clip. This is a little bit longer. This is from the episode Trauma. Doesn't like to be touched. Yeah, I love this one. Okay.
So where did you learn to live on crumbs? He's not the only one with a history, huh?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I never saw it as that, though. It's normality. You always do for others.
Yes,
It
but
just
what you're
was.
telling me is I don't need much. I make sure not to need much so nobody can say no.
True. I'm a pretty low maintenance person, though.
Oh, you've got it nicely rationalized. You're not getting away with that. Wrapped in I'm a low maintenance kind of guy. And then I meet myself, this wonderful boyfriend who is a super high maintenance kind of guy. So I get to preserve the title.
Wait. Whoa.
His drama is always bigger than yours.
This is true.
Very true.
His history will always be shittier than yours.
Wow.
His family will always be shittier than yours.
Yep.
And he needs to cheat on you for you finally to say, I want something now. Which is great. But he shouldn't have to cheat on you for you to say, I need more.
True.
So where did you learn to refrain from asking, wanting, needing?
I think it starts with not wanting to be noticed. Growing up as that little gay boy, if you don't need much, you're not going to be noticed. So you can fly under the radar. I learned how to hunt and fish and be in Boy Scouts and play Little League and do what you were supposed to.
I absolutely just love that clip. I mean, the emotion, it just resonates with me so much. The story of his childhood and how he's taken that narrative of being small and not needing much, and maybe people can, not see me, and how he takes that into his adulthood and continues that story. I think that's something that's really unique about the series for me is how big narrative is. Can you talk a little bit about how that plays out in the series and then also your own work?
When you tell about your situation or your life or your pain, you tell a story. You always come in with a story. And the language that you use shapes your experience. And the story is the language. So part of the work is how do you change the story? You change the story, you change the language, you change the state, you change the outcome. And a lot of my work is that the story that you come in with is not the story that you leave with. So his story became a story of restraint. I don't ask for much, then I don't have to be disappointed. And I find myself a partner who asks for a lot, who I need to constantly take care of. So I have the perfect partner never to have to deal with my own longings, to meet my own hunger, because he's always more voracious than me. And until something bad happens in this couple, this man was willing to live on crumbs. And then one day, every relationship has a scorecard. And then you've done the thing that just suddenly shifts the scorecard, and I'm no longer prepared. I want more. And it actually is a very powerful, emboldening moment when somebody who has not wanted enough finally says, I want more. Of course, it's only people who haven't taken enough who worry that they're going to take too much.
Sure.
The ones who take plenty don't generally worry about taking too much. So now we begin to shift the relationship, that the other who's been always receiving and taking, maybe this is your chance for once to be the one who's going to give. And you're going to learn to ask and to receive and to trust that somebody actually wants to give to you because they see you, and you no longer have to be the little gay boy who had to hide. The power of this session for me also, and another one, also a lesbian couple that we also worked with, is that you get very counterintuitive narratives. You get stories that you are typically not used to hear because they are so gender specific in the minds of heterosexual people. And here you hear the woman speak in a way that is just what you generally have learned to hear in the mouth of men. And here you hear men talk with a level of vulnerability and openness that typically we want to say, it's not men, it's just women. So to debunk some of these gender stereotypes through these stories is also a very wonderful little prize.
It is a little prize. One thing that I love about that clip too is that moment when the other gentleman is like, hey, it's not about me. And he has this moment. He's like, but wait, it's always about me. It's such a little moment, a lovely moment where, that you can sort of hear that narrative changing for both of them. Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of tenderness, but even just the fact that it's called, trauma doesn't like to be touched. And this idea that you have these two men and, one of them likes talking and one of them likes touching. And the shift that needs to occur, that the one who talks needs to touch more and the one who touches may want to talk more. And we don't typically imagine that conversation in this configuration.
Sure.
And the tenderness is just melting. It melts you. This is one of my favorite sessions, actually.
Yeah, for sure. I just want to remind everybody that we will take questions in the second half. Just go ahead and comment or write your question underneath this post. But we do have another clip that I would love to share. This is from the first episode, so it's out right now if you want to listen to it. I've had better.
Oh, yes. Can you imagine somebody says this to you?
Oh my gosh, it's
I've
brutal.
had better.
So let's go ahead and hear that clip.
Did you have good sex with me before we got married?
Yeah.
Did you?
It was good enough.
I don't know what that means.
It was good, but I don't know. For the most part, it was good.
Say more.
I've had better, but I didn't think that would be so important.
And before we had kids, before we were married, I mean, it was totally different. I also didn't like the 5 minutes of sex. It was terrible.
Why did you do it?
Why did you? You did
I
it
didn't plan.
You
for
thought
5
that's what I
minutes.
need to give him.
No,
And
no.
he did it because he thought that's what I
I
can
don't
get.
think it's true. I didn't want it to be 5 minutes, but he was done in 5 minutes and gone.
And then nobody said, stay?
He's tired. I'm tired. I want to go to sleep. He doesn't want to have sex at night. He wants to have sex in the morning. It can be like a long romantic sex in the morning, right? Why not rent a hotel and start with that?
To me, like when you are renting a hotel in your city to have sex, I just can't do it like that.
You
I
did
don't
it
know.
with the girl.
It wasn't, but it was more about just the excitement of
All right, let me stop you a second, people. Because you don't tell him much. He doesn't tell you much. You let this thing degrade, both of you. You're a year into the discovery of the affair. And so we're not in the crisis mode. We're not. But the second phase is what I call the insight. It is the meaning making. Why did this happen? How did this happen? What did it mean for you? What did you find there? It's a both hand. It's what happened to you and what happened to us. And what can we learn from it? And how did we allow ourselves to enter a place where we both were quite unhappy? Neither of us really felt the other person is going to hear it, is going to take it, is going to receive it, just like that, without instantly switching into a blame mode, blame and defense. That's the conversation I hear you're trying to have. It doesn't really matter if it's around sex or about something else. The form is the same. Once you have this kind of pattern, just about every conversation will go in the same direction.
That I just love that clip and hate that clip so much. The reason why I love it is you managed to keep the couple so accountable, and that's something that feels really different in terms of therapy I've heard or experienced. Can you talk a little bit about when you know how to jump in or when you know to stay back, and how do you make those decisions in the moment?
It's like a question that you ask an artist, right? How do you know that you still need another coat of paint? And when do you think that this is the right density? And that it's a little bit the art of it, but it's a feeling. I know it's like music. When do you know, that you need to amplify, and when do you know that you need to go down from the crescendo into? So I think part of the work I do is very much in the here and now. It is a therapy of enactment. So it's what's happening in front of me. I see this conversation, and I really see two very articulate, educated people who are having and have had for years terrible sexual communication. Sorry, sadly, and neither of them knew how to get out of it, and knew how to just say this isn't good for me, or I think I have an idea of something better, or how is it for you? Anything besides what they were doing, which was kind of playing the oldest stereotypes, right?
And
it's
lonely.
Like he takes what he can get,
Yeah.
and she gives it to him, so she shoves it to him until he's kind of done, and she can, she's done with her chore. And these men, these are like, you kind of are used to hearing this in 19th century novels. You don't think you're going to hear this in 2017 in a young, urban, educated couple, right? But yes, that's what happens. So I'm rather direct. I'm a rather active therapist. There's many ways to do therapy. This just happens to be my craft, the way I do it. And I am very much in the details. And I am much more looking at the form than at the content. That's probably the most important thing. The form is the way that each person here was more in relation with their own assumptions than with the other. It was with their own ideas of what it's going to be and how it should be and how it's probably going to have to continue to be. And everyone was in a soliloquy rather than in a dialogue. And the form is, what is the dynamic between these two people? How do they avoid each other? How does one pursue and one avoid? How do they clash? What is the dance? I'm more interested in the dance than in the specific content, because once you see the pattern, it doesn't really matter what the content is. They will talk about a lot of things the same way.
Sure.
Because it becomes the pattern of their interaction. She shuts down, he goes elsewhere. That's their pattern. And I don't think that happened just around sexuality.
Oh, I'm sure not.
So now I'm looking at how did he learn to be a conflict avoidant person, and how did she learn to dissociate and to cut off? That's the pattern. It happens to be we're discussing it around sex because that's the presenting issue. But this is what I'm trying to tackle. It's like the structure of the house, not just a crack in the wall.
Yeah, one question that comes up over and over again that you ask is, where did you learn that?
Yes.
I love that question.
And it's actually, I'm going to tribute Terry Real again because he's a very close colleague. And he asks it in three ways. Where did you learn that? Who did you see do this? And who did this to you? It's the three. And it just generally takes you right back where it started.
Yeah.
It's very powerful.
It's that narrative that you tell yourself.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So we are going to start taking, people have been asking really lovely questions. By all means, continue to put your comments and questions in the box below. But second half, we'll start reading some of the questions. We've got one here. I have tried to have my husband not be my everything. But now I'm unsure what role he is supposed to have in my life. What is a partner supposed to be, and how big a role should they have? That is a big question.
In 1 minute or less.
Yeah.
Look, I don't think for many of these questions, first and foremost, I want to say there isn't one answer. I don't think there is one model of relationship. There are relationships that are very much like this, with a massive overlap. And then there are relationships, I don't know how to do this, that have just a tiny overlap, like this, you see? And some couples are very much built around togetherness, and some couples are built much more around a respective autonomy. So that's to you is to look at, you know, what kind of shared space do you want with him? But all relationships are based on trust. They're based on support. They're based on respect. They're based on reciprocity, on mutuality, on playfulness, on a lot of things. So that is generic. That you want to that you can bring to every design. The particular design is the one thing I would say to you is this. I do think that today we often are asking one person to give what once an entire village used to provide. We want the same person to satisfy a multitude of needs, and often contradictory ones, rather than making sure that you have a community of people with different people feeling different needs. Like in a company. I'm here in a company. There are different people here and everybody has different roles. And it is the togetherness, the coordination of all these people that create a coherent whole. And you want to think a little bit similarly when you think about your relationships. If he's not somebody you can talk about certain things, find yourself your girlfriend. Talk to her about some of these things. Then you're going to say, but I want to be able to talk to him about the things that you can talk about, and make sure that you surround yourself with a strong network of connections, so that you don't feel that whatever you can't get with your partner, you just won't get in life.
Well said. We have another question. Kim asked, what do you tell the couples after that first session with you?
Yes.
And do you recommend to
Wonderful
them
question.
that they continue working with someone else? A lot of those couples had other therapy that they went to.
Some people that I met with were in therapy, and this was a separate consultation. They all wrote to me before we met, and they all wrote to me after we met. So the first thing I ask people after the session is, when you go home, I want you within the next 2 weeks. Sometimes it's 2 days, sometimes it's 2 weeks. Depends if I told them to do certain things or not, to write. Where did you take this? Where did this land on you? What have you done with it? What stood out for you? What's the takeaway? All of that. And that is very, very important, because I need to know if something of substance took place there. And then I also say, I think, do you want a referral? I think you may want to continue work on this. You got a glimpse of it here, but in order for this to graft, in order for it to really become part, if you want a consultation, one way to look at it is that it's often like the beginning of sculpting, right? I'm slashing away at the gross shape, and I'm just creating the beginnings. But then what's going to make a new shape last is the chiseling. And that chiseling is the middle phase of therapy. That's much less dramatic than what often happens in a consultation, but it is where people really settle into a new mode with each other. And that requires ongoing. So I often will suggest, and often it was really not meant to be therapy. These are therapeutic conversations, much more than a therapy, for sure. And so they didn't ask, I didn't suggest. We came, we met, we had a powerful meeting together, and it was not meant to be anything more than that.
All right. Christina asked, how do we learn not to be so defensive with each other?
By owning your stuff, basically. By not going right back and saying, but you, I only do what I do because you do what you do, or say what you say, or make me be this way. You own it. You take responsibility, and you just accept the fact that you are imperfect. And therefore, you say things, you do things, you don't do things that make you imperfect. And if you can live with that and feel more responsibility than shame, you will find yourself more and more liberated. Instead of saying, but I said this because, you just say, I know I've said this at other times, and I realize that I take this way out of proportion, and I can see how I just ruin the evening, and that's so not what I want. And I have to take a look at this. Generally, what your partner will say is something to the effect of, I really appreciate your honesty, your openness, your self-reflection, your ability to own your stuff, and we'll work it through. It's amazing what happens. If you're not kicking back, but you're just doing this, then your partner generally reaches out. This is what typically will happen. So defensive means you have to accept that you are not always right, that you don't have a handle on truth and on reality, that there's not just one brain that works in a couple, but there are two people with two perspectives on the same situation, and these perspectives can sometimes be the exact opposite, to the point when you wonder, did this happen with the two of us in the same room? Yes. Yes, that's actually what happens. And so, can you tolerate the idea that your partner is experiencing the same situation so differently from you, without thinking that that means that one is right and one is wrong, and it's always an either or? And from that place, you become less defensive. You deal with your vulnerability because it's human. That's what I mean by accepting. It's not that it's okay, it just is.
Is that a Western thing? I mean, you've worked in so many different cultures, and I'm just curious because that like instinct to, why is saying sorry so hard? I don't know.
What is Western is the idea that everything has to be put out, that you have to talk about these things much more. In many other cultures, people just, are much more silent about a lot of things. So the defensiveness is really the idea that, when I'm alone, there are people who, even when they are alone, can explain to you that everything that's happened to them is because of other people. I didn't succeed because it's always externalized. It's others. But in a relationship, the other is right there. I mean, very few people come to couples therapy to say, I came to look at myself. They come to couples therapy to tell you, let me tell you, I'm an expert on my partner, and what's wrong with that person, fix him, fix her, And I typically will say that your relationship will change the day you take responsibility for that which is yours, just yours. Because then you create a space in between rather than this kind of convoluted thing. And for some people, that's very hard to do because then it means my mother was right, my father was right, I am a piece of shit, I am not a right person. I'm sorry to curse, but the language
that's not
inside,
my face. I'm just thinking them saying this to me.
Because people are harsh with themselves. I'm worthless. I will never be loved. I'm meant to be rejected. I mean, we live with a lot of negative voices inside of us. And I don't think that that's just cultural, but where we are meant to shine individually, I think the voice is sometimes sharper.
Interesting. On a related note, Bella asked, what are some practices couples can do to remain present while in conversation with each other? It's a great question.
The best way to remain present is really to repeat what you just heard. It is the old strategy or practice of reflective listening. If I heard you well, what I'm hearing you say, and then you repeat in as close to the way you heard it, is this it? Do I get it? Imago therapy has used this to perfection. Because it forces you to go over to the other side for a moment, leave your point of view, leave your experience, and just for a minute, see the world from the point of view of the other. That is very, very important. Breathe. Breathe when you start to feel activated and you're ready to it's this, and center yourself and ground yourself, and don't talk, actually. Don't talk until you find that you are more regulated. Or get up and walk. And just walk and just say, at this moment, I cannot talk, but I want to hear what you have to say. Can you say it again? But I need to move because I need energy in my body. It's that. And eye contact. I should probably put eye contact on the top as well. Eye contact. The majority, what happens is that when people get flooded or are activated, they look, men do that far more and far sooner than women because their sympathetic nervous system gets activated much faster. Parasympathetic, sorry. And they just start to look, you see the body. It's like, what? I can't take it. It's like too much intensity. So it's really the idea of just kind of, sometimes you don't have to resolve anything in the moment. You just want to be able to listen, which is the hardest thing to do, which is why the podcast, which is why listening, to come back full circle.
Victoria asks, how do you deal with a resistant client?
But resistant means what? To me? The fact that they may not want to do what I suggest doesn't mean they're resistant to me or they're resistant. That means maybe, I think resistant is a very complicated word. Some people are very defensive. Some people are rigid. Some people are more rigid. Some people are afraid that if they actually admit certain things, it's a proof that they are not
Their
worthy
whole world
of.
will crumble. Yeah.
So you go for the vulnerability and you go for the fear that is behind it. You go for the intransigence. You go for what blocks it. It's like what is the block that needs to be unclogged here, emotionally speaking, that would allow this person to create a pathway. That's the opposite of resistance, right? Pathways.
Two-part question. Alana asks, any advice for someone who is single?
And on what? Advice on what, Elan? Come back to us and specify this for a moment.
But the second part is, I've had a lot of people ask me, I'm not in a relationship.
Right.
Is this podcast for me? Like, can I get anything out of it?
Yes,
Yeah.
because look, these days, today you are in a relationship, tomorrow you may not be. Yesterday you were not, and tomorrow you are. We are not living lives in which we have either we are not in a relationship or we are in one for 70 years. We are in multiple relationships with breaks in between. And I don't know many people who have not had some experience of relationships, sometimes very short, but everybody lives in relationships. And the fact that these are couples doesn't mean that you can't translate all of the relational stuff that is in there to your relationships at work, with your friends, with your family, with your siblings, with your colleagues, with your neighbors. Relational intelligence is relational intelligence. So please don't think, I don't have a couple now, I'm not in a partnership, therefore it doesn't apply to me. Not at all. I really think this is the lens of relationship opens the door on multiple aspects of life. It's not because you're not in a couple that you haven't known betrayal or jealousy or loss or sadness or depression and or joy or love or all of that. So please, I'm very glad you asked, because this story is for everybody.
Yeah, especially the communication sort of techniques that you talk about a lot. It just applies to everything. I wanted to pick up a little bit on the joy and the sadness and everything you just talked about. I hear a lot of sadness and a lot of frustrations in the couples in the episodes, but I also hear a lot of laughter, and I find myself laughing a lot as I listen. Can you talk a little bit about the role of laughter and how you feel about that?
It's interesting because I've been asked this question now a few times about the laughter, and I think laughter in hell is very important. Laughter is perspective on the situation. Laughter shows you have some distance. Laughter shows that you sometimes can see the absurdity of the stuff we sometimes say or do. And I use a lot of laughter in the therapy, especially sometimes on very sad things. Laughter allows you to realize certain things without having it. It's a way of admitting without admitting. Yeah. And so it's another language that is extremely important in storytelling.
Kristen asks, what are the best principles to teach children to help set them up for healthy relationships? That's a great question.
You model with them. I think that kids are often very surprised when their parents come to them and say, I'm sorry. I really lost it this morning. I was stressed. It had nothing to do with you. I'm sorry I barked. Or you know what? I've been really sad these days. Why? Because my girlfriend is sick. And I know, I think if parents sometimes allow their children to see them more as human beings rather than just in their parental role, and showed them the myriad of feelings that they go through a day, if they actually taught their children to ask them, how was your day? Why is it always the parents who ask the children, how was your day? And how was you doing it, good, bad? But like, what happened to you today? What was an important thing you thought or felt or saw or experienced? That becomes really interesting. It's like, I too had this problem once with a friend of mine. So a certain kind of modeling on relational intelligence that parents often don't, they're more in a teacher role than in a, I don't even know, more parallel experience. I too, this person was really mean to you. Oh God, I had a kid in my class. I would go home. I was like so upset. I'd crawl in my corner and I'd cry. That would be often more important for your child to hear than just you're trying to have your kid not be sad. Tell them how sad you were, how miserable you sometimes felt, and how you came, and it took you a long time sometimes to finally feel okay about you. I think that is much more realistic and creates a much different connection between parents and children.
It's a lot less isolating too.
Much
Yeah,
less.
for sure.
Without flooding your kids. I'm not talking about sharing your emotional life with your kids and asking them to take care of you. I want to make very clear that there's a distinction there.
Perry asks, how can I ask for what I want without feeling needy? Context, I usually put others' needs first.
First of all, what's wrong with feeling needy? Where did that ever become a dirty word? As in what? It means weak, as in I can't do it alone? No, we don't. We need others. It's a given. So you can just say, you can also preface it exactly like that. I have a real thing about being needy, but people who are afraid of being needy are generally not could be needier. It's like, I often find that the worry that people have is not the one they should be having, because that's not their risk. They're at risk of the opposite. They're at risk of feeling that they have to do everything themselves. So, if you put other people's needs first, you ask yourself, how did you grow up? Did you grow up with people asking you on occasion how you doing? What do you need? What can I do for you? Or did you grow up in an environment in which this was never asked? Or did you grow up in an environment in which you had to learn about satisfying the needs of others, because only then could you maybe hope that something would come your way, because they needed you to parent them in order for them to be able to be there for you as a parent. You understand? There is all these kinds of scripts in the background. This sentence, I always put the needs of others first, has to be unpacked. This is the story of a life. This isn't just a story of a behavior. And I would want to ask you a lot of questions about that first. And from there, I probably could tell you more about how you can learn to ask. Asking is an essential relational verb. It's good. Some people need to ask more, and some people sometimes need to ask others more.
Actually, we are taking couples for the second season. If you want to go to estherfarrell.com and join the pantheon of folks here.
Yes, I should actually reiterate that. We are actually taking now new couples for the next season, all types of couples, all types of backgrounds. And as you know, we take out the names. It is anonymous. We don't change the voice. So you share the story. And we get to talk together.
I did want to ask that question. So one of the things is these are very intimate discussions that we're having. What was the process to prepare people to be a part of this thing that's going national?
After you write to me, my team from Audible, because this is a real team effort, meets with you on the phone and interviews you quite at length about the project separately, and gets to answer a lot of the questions that you may have. You decide what we talk about, not me, as always is the case. So you choose what you're comfortable with and what you would like to delve in. And it's done with respect. It's done with tact. Nobody here is into being sensational. it's really about, mining the human stories, not about exposing people and making them look foolish.
And if you hear the episodes, you'll hear that come through loud and clear. Jacques asks, how can I date in a healthy way where I can be open about my own issues while maintaining ownership of them and not making them...
Her issue to accommodate.
Yeah,
me.
there you go.
Yeah. So, Jacques, I think trust builds over time. And it goes both ways. You want to feel more trust in order to open up more, but it is the act of opening up more that will build the trust. And that's a risk taking. So you gradually, I don't know what your issues are, but it's about, you have to believe somewhere that the experience of love is a verb. And I learn to love you as I get to know you. And sometimes the more you reveal to me, and you reveal your vulnerabilities, your imperfections, your issues, your struggles, whatever it is, I actually find your humanity and I find your courage, and that will grip me rather than that will make me reject you. And if I do reject you as I get to know you more, then that means that I am not the right person for you. And you will find the person who actually will find you gripping rather than want to loosen, to lose the grip if you want, in the reverse. But it takes time, it takes interaction, it takes experience, it takes risk-taking. There is no intimacy without risk-taking. It is fearful, always, to expose. I do this in this project too. I also feel exposed. It's like nobody's ever seen what I do behind my door. And here it is. So that you can't avoid, because that's part of what creates human interaction and human connection.
That's life. We have about 10 more minutes, so be sure to get in your questions if anybody has any more. Monica asks, what communication advice do you have for newlyweds in specific?
Right. So here's the conundrum of the newlywed is, we're getting along, everything is so nice, how can I bring this up now? So you don't bring it up in the beginning because you don't want to jinx. Then you don't want to bring it up in the beginning because things are so nice and you don't want to taint them. Then you don't bring it up because you didn't bring it up before. And then you don't bring it up at all anymore because now how you're going to bring this up? They're going to be asked, why didn't you talk about this for the past 6 years? So I think this notion of everything has to be pink and rosy in the beginning and everything is supposed to be beautiful and passionate, and this is a joke, we got to become realistic. Plus, most people at this point don't meet and marry at 18. They marry in their late 20s. Come on, you kind of have a sense of what you come with. You know what you've been challenged by. You know the things that are important to you. You've kind of sown your proverbial oats before you even go in. And in fact, the whole capstone model of marriage is, I've already worked on my identity and here I am and you're choosing me is an act of recognition of how good I've worked on it. No, isn't it? So from that place, you just say, as we embark on marriage, what is important for you? How do you see our life? How do you imagine, what we do, where we live, if we want to have children or not? Is our sexual communication and our sexual connection good for you? Is this the area that we need to strengthen? What are the things that come easy to us? And what are the things that probably are going to be our challenging zone? The vast majority of couples know from the second day on what their issues will be. And this is research from Gottman and a lot of other people. It actually doesn't change, in terms of the content. So my advice for you as newlyweds is that you not be scared to bring up difficult issues from the start because you're afraid that he will not like you, he will think you're too much, he will think this is difficult, he will think maybe it's not worth it, you will have to reevaluate your ROI.
That's really interesting that you used gendered, he will think about,
Because I thought the question came from a woman.
Oh,
wasn't
you're
it?
right, okay.
I
Well,
think.
very heteronormative.
It was. It was. No, I would say the same thing, but I think this was a woman's question,
Okay,
so that's
fair
why
enough. Alex asks, I have asked my partner to consider polyamory, and she responds with, well, if that's what you need, we should break up. This makes me feel like she's putting all of the responsibility entirely on me, and I don't know how to proceed in the conversation. Any ideas?
Oh, this is a good question. Because you could replace the word polyamory with, my partner to consider living in Paris. I asked my partner I asked my partner something, and my partner basically said, over my dead body. And then you go back to your partner and you say, you know what? Let's take this as a different subject. Imagine I asked that we go live in London. Imagine I asked that we go live in the woods. Imagine I asked that we, and if you're going to answer me from this all or nothing perspective, this is going to make our communication very difficult, because you are going to probably want me to be honest, but you're also telling me that you can't handle my honesty. And you will become somebody who often is a lying invitee, as my colleague Ellen Bader calls it. You make it impossible for me to actually come to you with stuff. So forget the polyamory thing. I think we have a communications issue here, and I want us to talk about that. Can you enter in a conversation with me about stuff that's really uncomfortable? And maybe we do have very different values, and then we need to think, but that is as much me as you. It's not just I make a decision, can I live by your rules, or if not, I should go look elsewhere. This is a warning sign to you. And take her up on this, but not just in relation to the polyamory. Forget polyamory conversation for a moment. Change it with another word and work on the structure.
All right. Last question. Kate asks, how does one find a good couples therapist?
You ask around, you read about them, and then you meet with them. You meet with a few, one time or sometimes two. It's worth the checking it out. And you see if there is a fit. I think the most important thing is that you can find a lot of good couples therapists, but you want the one that feels right to you. And that is a matter of fit. And the fit is their room, their accent, their style. If both of you resonate with them, it's a lot of things, sometimes intangible things. A lot of us have good, solid training and we work differently. Do you want somebody who's very active? Do you want someone? And ask the therapist, how do you work? What is your way of working with a couple? How do you understand what we're grappling with? If you were to do a treatment chart here, what would it look like? Do you think you can help us? How do you envision the work? Ask questions. It's the same as when people go to the doctor and they don't ask enough to the doctor. What do you think my treatment will look like? If you make a decision for me, I want to know when I wake up that it was the right decision. That I would have made that decision even if I could think and I was cogent. Don't be passive. There are three things that make therapy successful. One is the fit. And I am not the right fit for everybody either. The better the therapist, actually, the more experienced the therapist, the more we know who we are good for and who we are not necessarily the right person for. Number two, how good is the therapist at what they do, regardless of the modality that they use to do it? You can be good in a number of different approaches. It's how good you are in the approach that you follow. And the third, which is what I'm asking you to do, is the ongoing evaluation of the treatment with the people who are in the treatment. Because then you are engaged in your actual process of change and improvement. Don't just sit there and then say, they're not doing it for us. If it doesn't work, lots of people come to me and say, I say, bring it up. And just say to the therapist, I have a feeling we've been talking about the same thing for the last 10 weeks and I don't see movement. Bring it up, be proactive and engaged in your own treatment. It is true for all medical treatments that the result is much better when the patient, the couple, you, the person, is actively engaged in the evaluation of the treatment itself. Those three items.
Well said. So I just want to thank everybody for joining us. Thank you, Esther, for being such a lovely guest. a couple asks here. Be sure to follow Audible's Facebook page if you'd like to learn more about exclusive interviews and events. This is just the first of many that we're going to host. Please listen and learn more at audible.com/Esther. We'll be posting all of the episodes there for you to listen to. There are 4 right there. And so we'll just leave you right now with the audio trailer in case you missed any of the audio snippets at the top. Thank you so much.
When you pick a partner, you pick a story. And often, you will be recruited for a play that you didn't audition for.
I told her I didn't know it was going to be like this, that once we had a child that I would be like downgraded, because it's now like all about the kids.
What's it like to be someone's disappointment for 20-something years?
It's hard.
Where Should We Begin with Esther Perel is an Audible original series, bringing you into the office of the iconic relationship therapist as she counsels real couples on modern love.
You can both tell me all kinds of things, and I can listen to each of you. I'm married to none of you, so it's very easy. But you need to reach each other.
These 10 anonymous couples have chosen to share their most intimate and unscripted conversations.
I was going in the bathroom and I was burying my face in a towel and biting it and howling and crying, frustrated.
Esther helps each couple put words to things they felt but didn't quite know how to say.
Sometimes I treat you poorly because I see him as an extension of...
Him is not here, you are here.
Because I see you as an extension of me.
Mhm.
Together, we're going to aim for a different conversation, a different exchange.
Okay. So how do I do that?
I will try to help you.
So, where should we begin?